How's it going, everyone? This is Kelly. Want to talk a little geography today. I'm sorry if the mic quality is not great. I'm literally speaking through my headphones, so I don't have like a cool mic or anything. Um, right here, right off the bat, I want to show you the emerging mega regions. So what this means is these are basically the big population centers of the U.S. The U.S. isn't the population really isn't distributed evenly, as you can imagine. That's for various reasons, including geography, but this map shows you where the big centers are. The Texas Triangle, so like Dallas is up here, San Antonio, Austin, there's Houston, you get Phoenix, Denver right there, Southern California. You get it. New York all through here, Atlanta. Look at Florida. It's pretty much one big just conglomeration of people. And since I do live in Ohio, I want to talk about the Great Lakes first, the mega region. This map shows it as including places like St. Louis and whatever, Louisville. I mean, there's no way that I would consider states like Missouri or Kentucky part of the Great Lakes region because they don't even border the Great Lakes. So today I'm just going to talk about the states that border the Great Lakes because that, in my definition, would be the Great Lakes region. I'm also going to talk about Ontario because Ontario borders four of the five Great Lakes. Actually, fun fact, Lake Michigan's the only lake that Canada does not border. This is entirely within US borders. The other four are bounded by Canada as well, Ontario specifically. So, we'll zoom out. I'll show you just how big. Ontario is huge. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but you can see where Ontario borders the Great Lakes. And here's that cool little Windsor corridor area. And that's where a lot of Canada's population is. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I want to show this as well. If I can zoom out, that would be cool. Guess it's not letting me, whatever, we'll just drag it. Oh, come on. There we go. All right, so the boundary of this map shows the watershed of the Great Lakes. So basically all the rainfall and stuff that lands within this boundary is going to essentially drain into the Great Lakes. Obviously barring like evaporation and whatnot, absorption into the ground, but water that does come here and ends up as runoff is going to flow into the Great Lakes. And it looks like there's a lot of rivers here because there are, but they're mostly minor. So the big contributor actually to the water levels of the Great Lakes is going to be rain, as you can imagine. The largest contributing river to the Great Lakes system is the Maumee River, which is where Toledo is. But, sorry. The St. Lawrence River, most people know the St. Lawrence River, but that actually drains the Great Lakes. That doesn't flow into the Great Lakes. So the flow of water is going to be from Lake Superior. It's going to fall. Hold on, I actually have a map for that. So it'll start out in Lake Superior, and you can see the elevation's kind of high up there. It flows down as the elevation drops. It's going to flow into Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. I'll show you on the GPS, it's technically one lake, but people sometimes separate them. Then the elevation drops some more, flows into Lake Erie, goes over Niagara Falls, into Lake Ontario. That's a pretty big elevation drop there. That's why Niagara Falls is pretty big. It's going to keep dropping, and then it'll go into the St. Lawrence and end up at sea level in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the Atlantic Ocean. So, as I was saying, Lake Huron and Lake Michigan are technically one lake, and I'll show you why. So that's what separates them. It's actually 3.5 miles long. So I would consider that one lake. It doesn't look like it, and sometimes people consider them separately, but it's one lake. And if you combine Lake Huron, Lake Michigan into the big lake that it actually is, it's going to be the largest freshwater lake in the world. If you consider them separately, that will go to Lake Superior. That'll be the biggest freshwater lake in the world. The Caspian Sea is technically a lake because it's inland. It doesn't have any flow into it, but it's salt water. It's saline, so I don't really consider that a lake. I'm talking specifically freshwater lakes. So I'm going to hit you guys with some facts here. The total Great Lakes surface area is 244,000 square kilometers. That doesn't really mean much. That's just a big area. That would be a big state. That would be bigger than the state of Minnesota, just in water. But since the Great Lakes aren't really that deep, the volume is going to be about 22,671 kilometers cubed. And that collection of fresh water is actually not the largest collection of fresh water in the world. There is a lake in Russia called the Lake Baikal, and its surface area is only 31,000 square kilometers. So compare that to the total Great Lakes surface area, 244,000 square kilometers, to 31. You would think there'd be more water in the Great Lakes, right? Wrong. Lake Baikal is over a mile deep at its deepest part, and it averages about half a mile deep at any point. That's the average. So really the biggest contributor to volume is going to be lake depth. And so Lake Baikal's total water volume is 23,000 kilometers cubed. Once again, Great Lakes, 22,000, Lake Baikal, 23,000. So that depth just adds so much more water to it. So that's really, really cool. But sorry, I was just looking at the notes I wrote down. I wasn't really messing with that. But yeah, so that's a really cool fact. I want to show this figure again. These are the maximum depths. So Lake Superior is the deepest of the Great Lakes. It goes 1333, as you can see. Lake Erie is actually bigger than Lake Ontario in terms of surface area, but look how shallow it is, 210 feet, max depth. It averages about 60 feet. And then look at Lake Ontario, 802 feet deep. So I have another graphic here. So once again, look at this, the surface area, 25,000 square kilometers. There's the miles. Oh yeah, if you want to convert square kilometers to square miles, you just divide by 2.59, but I like talking metric just because it's international. So 25,000 there, Lake Ontario 19. Look at the water volume difference, 480 cubed kilometers. If I ever say square for volume, I'm sorry, I mean cubed. Lake Ontario 1640. That's over 4 times more water in Lake Ontario than Lake Erie. And once again, that goes back to the Baikal total Great Lakes water volume. I mean, it's not the surface area that really matters, it's the depth. And if you can combine them, then you just have a massive amount of water. So that just shows you right there, that's a prime example, just within the Great Lakes themselves, that depth really makes a huge difference. So that's that. Couple cool things about the Great Lakes. There's some cool islands in there. Lake Superior, famous for Isle Royale. It's actually a national park, one of the 60 U.S. national parks. And Isle Royale is famous because it has populations of both moose and wolves on it. And it's not natural, they were introduced by humans, but these two populations interact. The wolves eat the moose. So it's actually really well documented, the population cycles that this island goes through in regards to these two animals. So moose periodically increase in numbers depending on availability of food, weather, what have you. And as the moose population increases, there's going to be more food for the wolves. So the wolf population is going to increase. And then if the wolf population increases too much, then they'll kill off too many moose. The moose population will drop. It could also drop, from harsh winters and disease. So when the moose population drops, then the wolf population is going to drop because there's not enough food. So that was a really famous study done on Isle Royale, and it was good for, science. So that's cool. Once again, there's the Mackinac Strait. There's a bunch of islands, actually, in the Great Lakes. Some of them are famous. Kelly's Island, Put-in Bay. But this right here, Manitoulin, this is the largest island in a lake in the world. And what's even crazier is, if you zoom in, Manitoulin Island actually has its own lakes. And even within these lakes, you can see like right here, there's islands in these lakes. So I'm going to try to say this without confusing you. So you have an island in a lake. That lake's on an island that is also in a lake. So it's like island lake inception there, kind of crazy. So now moving on, I want to talk about the states that border the Great Lakes, because this is the Great Lakes Megalopolis. So you have Minnesota. Minnesota's the largest of these states. It's the 14th largest state actually in area, about 206,000 kilometers squared, and the miles would be 79,000. So it's a pretty big state. And then you have Wisconsin. Wisconsin's also a rather large state. It's the 25th largest state by area. Then you have Chicago. Chicago doesn't really, or not Chicago, Illinois, sorry. Illinois doesn't really border too much of the Great Lakes. I mean, there you can see it goes from about here to here. That's the only swath of land that Illinois really has on the Great Lakes. But Chicago's right on there, so you cannot forget that. Same with Indiana. If I'll click on this, you can see Indiana just has a little stretch right there. Hold on, I'll go back to Illinois. You can see like the stretch along there. It's not like a lot of lakefront, but I mean, it's Chicago. It's like one of the biggest metro areas in the US, so that's really important. Then look at Michigan. Michigan owns an absurd amount of coastline, and it has the Upper Peninsula here. This Upper Peninsula is not even attached to Michigan. It's separated. That's what makes the Strait of Mackinac that I said that actually makes these one lake. So not a lot of people live up here, but I mean, Michigan actually has a ton of coastline along the Great Lakes, so that's pretty cool. And there's Wisconsin's coast. It has a coast up here, and then down here there's Green Bay. Minnesota's coast is just up here. Duluth is like the big population area. And then now we're down to the great state of Ohio. Let's go. There we go. That's Ohio's coast. Pennsylvania, again, is kind of like, it's like Indiana or Illinois. It just doesn't have a lot of land on the Great Lakes, but it's still considered the Great Lakes area, so I obviously have to include that. And Erie's really its big port. And then you have New York. New York has coastline on both Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And also it has a border right on the St. Lawrence River, which drains the entire Great Lakes. So that's pretty cool. And the big metro areas, let's see, did I miss anything? Oh, here's some, yeah, here's this figure again if you want to see it. If you want to see, you know, different water volumes, surface areas, depths, what have you. Here's the big population areas, and these are combined statistical areas. So it's not, it's like a metro, but a combination of metros. So, for example, Detroit would be right here. Metro Detroit would probably be in this area, but this combined statistical area includes other metro areas that would be up here. So that's what these numbers are. They're just big combined metro areas. Like Cleveland's metro area is about like that size, but this is going to include pretty much half of Ohio's coastline along Lake Erie as one combined statistical area. So I have some figures here. The big one, these are old populations from 2009, but it's certainly, these are the projected populations. It's probably closer to this, maybe like half, split in half this. So this total area is probably about 10 million right now, but these are really the big metro areas. Chicago, as I mentioned, Toronto, if you want to see Toronto again, Toronto's metro area is along Lake Ontario right here. Niagara Falls right here, you cross Niagara Falls and you're in Canada right along the Toronto metro area. So Montreal, it's including it on this figure as part of the Great Lakes Megalopolis. I don't really consider it because it's on the St. Lawrence River. Let's take a look at Montreal. So you travel down the St. Lawrence, Montreal's right there. So I guess it could be considered Great Lakes, but I was talking specifically places that are bounded by it. So the states that are all along here are Minnesota. Minnesota up here, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. Those are all the states that border the Great Lakes. And if you combine that total area, it's about 1 million square kilometers with a population of about 85 million people. So definitely a big area, a ton of people that live in these states that border the Great Lakes. What's crazy is that Ontario is almost as big as all those states combined. Its total area is about 917,000 square kilometers. But the population of all of Ontario is about, I would put it at around 14 to 15 million. So let's say like Ontario is slightly smaller than all these states that I named. The state's population, 85 million. Ontario, about 15. So you can see Canada really isn't densely populated. It has massive area, but not a lot of people live in the areas. So about 85, not 85, 50% of Canada's population actually lives along the Windsor, Quebec City corridor. So Windsor's right across the Detroit River from Detroit. Starting there, we go through Toronto, Ottawa, the capital of Canada, Montreal, Quebec City. This entire area is pretty much a straight line. That's about 50% of Canada's total population. And the Quebec City, Windsor corridor is about 18 million people, plus or a little bit more. Canada's total population is about 37 million. Actually, the state of California has a bigger population than all of Canada. California's population is about 38 million, Canada 37 million. So half of the population along that corridor. So it's really, really interesting. And I could talk more. I think you guys get it, though. I could always go in more depth. There's literally a million things to talk about, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the geography of this area, talk a little bit about the demographics, the people. Demographics is the study of populations, so wanted to talk a little bit about populations. I can rattle off some more numbers, like the most populated state along the Great Lakes Megalopolis. Oh my God, I can't even say it. Megalopolis is New York. New York's total population is about 19 million, but 9 million of those people are in New York City. So then actually this kind of surprises people, but Ohio is number 3 in regards to this. So we're going to go New York, number 1, 19 million people. Then you go to Pennsylvania with about 12.8 million people. And then you go to Ohio with about 11.6 million people. So that makes Ohio actually the 7th most populous state. People wouldn't think that even live in Ohio. And it's just a reality, and it's because Ohio's population is really spread out. I mean, we have like Cleveland, obviously, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, whatever, Toledo. But not a lot of people live in any one of those areas. I mean, Columbus is the 15th biggest city in the U.S. It's about 805,000 people. No, I think now it's about 840, actually, more towards there. But, I mean, that doesn't count for 11.6 million people. So most of Ohio's people live pretty much scattered throughout the state. And then, so I said New York. New York's actually the 4th largest state in the U.S. by population. Pennsylvania is going to be 5. Illinois is actually number 6. And then Ohio 7. So Illinois' population is about 12.8 million. And then you go up to, I'm trying to remember, is Minnesota or Wisconsin a bigger population? So actually, Wisconsin's a bigger population. It's about 5.795 million people. Then you have Minnesota at 5.576 million people. And, oh yeah, Indiana is actually bigger than both of them. That's about 6.666 million people. That makes Indiana the 17th largest state in terms of population. So, did I miss any states? Okay, good. I didn't want to leave anyone out. Another cool thing. So we were talking about populations, or not populations, elevations. Most of these states, obviously, they're just hilly. Like the highest points in Minnesota, the highest point in Minnesota is about 2,300 feet. Ohio, 1,500 feet. Michigan, 1,900 feet. Illinois, 1,200 feet. Indiana, 1,200 feet. Wisconsin, about 1,900 feet. Then you get to Pennsylvania and New York. And Pennsylvania and New York are actually, I don't know if the satellite will help. Yeah, you can kind of see it here. They actually have part of, the Appalachians. So the Appalachians are right here. There's a valley in between, and then you have the Allegheny Mountains, which is kind of like a subpopulation of the Appalachians. So that's going to make, Pennsylvania a lot higher in elevation. So Pennsylvania's highest point is about 3,200 feet. And then New York actually has its own mountain range right here. It's technically part of the Appalachians, but it's the Adirondacks. And the highest point in New York is actually 5,000 feet, 5,300 feet. So that's actually not bad, considering the highest point east of the Mississippi River it's in the Rocky Mountains. or not the Rocky Mountains. Gosh, I can't talk anymore. It's in the Blue Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains. So let's see if we can find it right here. The Blue Ridge Mountains. That's going to be the highest point. It's going to be the highest point east of the Mississippi. Great Smoky Mountains. I don't think there's a difference between the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Great Smoky Mountains. It's kind of considered like the same thing. The highest point, though, I'm pretty sure it's Mount Rogers. No, it's not called Mount Rogers. I think it's called Clingman's Dome. Yeah, there it is. Clingman's Dome. That's the highest point in the Great Smoky Mountains, the entire Appalachians. It's about 6,600 feet. I don't think it'll even say on here. 6,600 feet. And to give you perspective, the highest point in the U.S. is Mount Whitney in California, and that's 14,505 feet. And so the actual contiguous U.S., the lower 48, they're not really that. I mean, the highest point, like I said, is 14,000 feet. That is high, but then you consider like Mount Denali up in Alaska, that's 20,000 feet. And then you're talking, if you want to know the biggest in the world, obviously Mount Everest, that's about 29,000 feet tall. So it's twice as tall as the tallest point in the lower 48. And the highest point east of the Mississippi is Clingman's Dome. I believe it's 6,600 feet or 6,800 feet, somewhere along in there. It's high, but not that high. So if you look at the GPS, you can see it's actually wooded up in here. And then you have right here like the beginning of the breadbasket of the U.S., a lot of just flat land that's farmed. East of Ohio, eastern Ohio, you actually have some Appalachian foothills down here. You get some more forests. And then you get to Pennsylvania. There's a lot of forests, especially in the center of the state, because there are a lot of hills. And then New York, obviously the Adirondacks here. That's where actually New York City gets a lot of its water from. So you can see like it's flat, definitely a lot of farmland. Still farmland here, of course, but then there's more like actual trees and stuff. So I think that's pretty good for the Great Lakes region. If you want to know any more information, of course, just, Google it. There's plenty of information out there, population-wise, geography-wise. But I hope that was a good overview, a little in depth. Thanks for listening.